technocrat, elitist, detached. These are the critiques of incoming Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney. The most interesting observation about the man is that he owns this criticism as the new leader of the Canadian Liberal movement, seeking to be the antithesis of the increasingly adversarial Donald Trump. So let's dive deeper into the man and what he means for Canadian politics, and this week's Modern Problems YouTube channel video, Politician Review, Mark Carney. Mr. Carney, banker, investor, and now politician. Who is the man, and how did he emerge as Canada's next leader? Born in the remote town of Fort Smith in the Northwest Territories, Carney was the son of a high school principal and a descendant of Irish immigrants. He moved to Edmonton in Alberta when he was 6, where he spent the duration of his childhood playing hockey and excelling at school at St. Francis Xavier High School. Here, his father dabbled in politics, running as a member of the Liberal Party in the Edmonton elections, although he failed to win his bid. However, he did stay active in the Liberal Party politics during Mark's childhood. Following the completion of his secondary education, Mark enrolled at Harvard University in the U.S., where he continued his hockey ambitions as the varsity team's backup goalie and continued to excel in school, graduating with a bachelor's in economics with high honors in 1988. Following his success at Harvard, Carney began his studies at Oxford University, attaining both a Master of Philosophy and then a Doctorate of Philosophy, respectively, both in economics. Always the competitor dating back to his hockey days, Carney's thesis followed the guise, the dynamic advantage of competition. During this time, he also met his wife, Diana Fox, a respected British economist in her own right, active in ESG policy, a theme that will return later on. As Carney completed his education, he moved into the world of finance, beginning his career in the esteemed investment bank Goldman Sachs, where he worked in sovereign risk and emerging countries' debt capital markets. In layman's terms, this means he was managing risk related to the debt of governments, analyzing which countries were likely to default, and how to manage investor money in this complex world. If you know anything about emerging markets debt in the 1990s, then you'll immediately go to the 1998 Russian default, sending the US markets in a spin from over-leveraged hedge funds in the space, in which Mr. Carney was heavily involved on Goldman's side, as well as working with the South African government's foray into the capital markets after the adoption of its post-apartheid regime. All this goes to show Carney was involved in some of the biggest and most consequential events of his times in this domain. He also became very well traveled, working in Goldman's New York, Boston, London, Tokyo, and Toronto offices, allowing him to build an international reputation as a managing director for Goldman Sachs. This experience offered Carney an opportunity into central banking in 2003, where he joined the Bank of Canada as a deputy governor, helping to guide policy and eventually land a role in the Department of Finance, where he then served as a senior associate finance minister to both the Conservative and Liberal finance minister from 2004 to 2007. During this time, he was a key decision maker in two consequential actions, one focused on adjusting the taxation of income trusts, and the second involving a sale of the government's stake in Petro-Canada for a healthy return. However, in early 2008, as the financial crisis was about to come on, Carney wiggled his way into position as the governor of the Bank of Canada, replacing the outgoing David Dodge and superseding the expected ascendant Paul Jenkins, who had held the senior deputy governor role before. With his appointment, Carney became the youngest ever central bank governor within the G20 alliance. As the '08 crisis wreaked havoc on financial markets, Carney rightly anticipated the global contagion, cutting rates in April 2008 in order to ease the strain on the Canadian economy while his European contemporaries continued to hike rates. He maintained this stance of holding rates low to encourage economic activity through monetary stimulus, serving to stabilize the Canadian economy through the worst of the crisis, allowing it to outperform its peers in the G8 and begin a much more expedient recovery compared to its partner nations. His confidence, clarity, and focus on stable messaging are credited with helping Canadians to weather the crisis much more effectively than its southern neighbor. While it's difficult to attribute an entire economy's resilience to one man, it can be stated that Carney was a net benefit for Canada's fortunes, and he is deserving of his 2012 recognition as Central Bank Governor of the Year by Euromoney magazine, in addition to numerous other accolades. Carney's success was noticed around the world, especially in Britain, where he became the first non-Briton governor of the Bank of England since its founding in 1694. He took over in 2013 with the goal of modernizing the central bank, focused on increasing its presence in the media as a force of stability. Carney's first years were relatively straightforward, with efforts to rein in rising housing prices, something that he now faces again as PM of Canada. His most controversial event came during the 2016 Brexit events, in which he stated that the UK's secession would cause a recession. However, as the events unfolded, he worked to maintain stability in the financial markets, stating that the central bank would continue operating normally. Approaching the end of his term in early 2020, Carney cut rates as his final major act as governor to help prepare the economy for the shocks of COVID-19. Following the conclusion of his governorship in England, Carney took on two major roles back in his home country of Canada. First, he was an advisor to Trudeau during the pandemic, speculated to take over as Minister of Finance, and even touted as a backup if Trudeau were to resign. While none of these predictions manifested at the time, Carney kept an unofficial linkage to the Liberal Party during these events. Second, Carney took on the role of vice chairman of Brookfield Asset Management, a position intensely focused on the firm's ESG, environmental, social, and corporate governance investing, and what's known as impact investing. This was back in late 2020, when this stuff was still in vogue, although it wasn't complete without some controversy. Carney had to retract a statement about the firm's net zero carbon status due to some hidden accounting trickery that made his efforts look a little more successful than they actually were. He was also involved in efforts to bring about carbon credit trading as a means of incentivizing green corporate behavior. While making some statements about the new market, Carney invoked confidence in his ability to bring about change. However, almost 4 years later, it's been relatively lackluster. In addition to his work with Brookfield, Carney was heavily involved in other corporate boards, including Stripe, the payments company, Bloomberg LP of the Michael Bloomberg, on top of working with COP26 about net zero policy, and serving as an economic advisor to the Liberal Party in late 2024. And that's where we're left today. As Trudeau resigned given abysmal ratings, the lost a decade of Canadian economic growth, and an ability to crack down on Trump's aggression, Mark Carney has emerged as his successor, vastly changing the fortunes of the Liberal Party in recent weeks. During the Liberal Party's elections from late February through early March, Carney won 86.84% of the votes, winning a majority in all 313 electoral districts, and beating out the closest competitor, Chrystia Freeland, who's Trudeau's former finance minister, who resigned last year among budgetary concerns. On March 14th, Carney assumed his role as Prime Minister of Canada with a full plate in front of him. In his victory speech, Carney invoked his steady Eddie character with strong words for those worried about American aggression. Quote, America is not Canada, and Canada never ever will be part of America in any way, shape, or form. We didn't ask for this fight, but Canadians are always ready when someone else drops the gloves. So Americans should make no mistake. In trade, as in hockey, Canada will win. With Canadian federal elections set to take place this year, Carney faces an uphill battle as the Liberal Party has drastically fallen out of favor compared with the Conservatives under Pierre Poilievre. However, his ascendancy appears to have been a turning point, and it looks like the election will be much closer than anticipated when Trudeau was still at the helm. So with his background and positions clear, let's dig into Carney as a leader and a politician. As per the last Politician Review, we'll be conducting a ranking based on three categories: policy, leadership, and impact. So let's delve into Mark Carney's policies to understand his worldview. His political platform includes, for trade and sovereignty, he's pledged to protect Canadian sovereignty in the face of U.S. pressure. He supports retaliatory tariffs against the U.S. while seeking to negotiate a common approach to trade. He wants to sit down with Mr. Trump, as has appeared to work for others, but only when there is respect for Canadian sovereignty as well as common approach. In terms of his economic expertise, his central banking experience allows Carney to provide some unique insights into monetary policy and financial stability, although we expect much the same as before. We expect to see a heavy focus on climate finance given his background, and he has championed the ability of the financial services sector to play a large role in achieving net zero emissions. It's uncertain what his national policy would be, but it's likely to follow this type of guise. For his energy policy, Carney aims to make Canada an energy superpower by balancing conventional energy with renewable sources like solar and wind. He emphasizes the potential for a low-carbon economy to enhance Canada's competitiveness. He's targeted the federal government's use of fossil fuels, although it'll be tricky to balance the immense prosperity brought upon by Canada's widespread oil and gas drilling in its interior. However, it looks like the Canadian consumer will actually be better off as he's proposed eliminating the consumer carbon tax and shifting the burden to corporate polluters, a critical part of his drive to jumpstart consumer spending by putting money in the pockets of everyday Canadians. Good in theory, although perhaps limited at best in practice. So, Carney's policies appear comprehensive on paper, but implementing them will require careful navigation of Canada's complex political and economic landscape, especially given the immediate pressures from down south. His approach combines his financial expertise with a strong focus on climate action and protecting Canadian interests. Although experienced, I don't see a concrete plan here to kickstart Canadian growth, so I'm admittedly quite skeptical here. Hence, I rate his policy platform a solid 6 out of 10. In terms of leadership, Mark Carney's leadership style is shaped by his unique background as a central banker turned politician. Unlike many career politicians, Carney brings a wealth of experience in handling global financial crises and economic upheavals. This is where I believe he'll shine, and the polls tend to agree. One of Carney's strengths is his ability to communicate complex economic ideas effectively. His background in finance and his roles at the Bank of Canada and Bank of England have honed his skills in explaining intricate policies to diverse audiences. This ability could prove crucial in rallying public support for his initiatives. His leadership has also been tested in high-pressure situations, particularly during the '08 financial crisis and Brexit. These experiences have likely contributed to his reputation as a calm and decisive leader in times of turmoil. However, Carney faces challenges as a relative newcomer to elected politics. His transition from the world of central banking to the rough and tumble of partisan politics will be closely watched. Some critics may question whether his technocratic approach can translate effectively into political leadership. While a potential vulnerability, he has embraced his position as an outsider, which as we've seen can be very effective, against his political opponents who are career politicians. This may turn out to be one of his strengths, given the complexities and lack of precedent for Canada's current situation. Carney has shown a willingness to take strong stances, particularly in his rhetoric against US President Donald Trump's trade policies and annexation threats. This assertiveness could resonate with Canadians seeking a leader who will stand up for national interests. Polls have immediately turned around for the Liberal Party, with Carney taking full advantage of the rally around the flag effect to show that Canadians will not bow down to American demands. Given his impressive background and early signs of political acumen, I would rate Carney's leadership potential as an 8.5 out of 10. He's done difficult things before as a central banker, and he's saying the right things so far. And so I feel fairly confident about his leadership ability, and again, everyday Canadians appear to feel pretty good about him too. And finally, his impact. While it's early on in Carney's tenure as Prime Minister, we can assess his potential impact based on his stated goals and actions in previous roles. In terms of economic management, Carney's expertise in finance and central banking positions him well to navigate Canada through economic challenges, including the ongoing trade tensions. However, his lack of concrete plan may serve to weaken him, especially as the Liberal Party is largely responsible for years of stagnant growth. He's going to really need to set himself apart in this regard to get a positive review from me. For international relations, Carney's strong stance against the US pressures and his willingness to engage in retaliatory measures signal a potentially more assertive Canadian foreign policy. His international experience could also benefit Canada in global forums, as I can imagine Canada getting cozier with Mexico and the EU in the face of an aggressive Trump, which might be about the best he can do given the alternatives. For Canada's political landscape, his leadership has already shifted the political dynamics in Canada, with the Liberal Party seeing a surge in popularity under his leadership. This could really turn Canadian politics upside down, as Pierre Poilievre probably felt poised to cruise to an easy victory before this shakeup. For his trade policy, his approach to the trade conflict balances firm retaliation with openness to negotiation, which could have substantial impacts on Canada's economic relationships. No one knows what's going to happen, but I need to see some more solid action before I can make a judgment on this one. For his climate action, his emphasis on climate-friendly policies and experience in climate finance could significantly impact Canada's approach to environmental issues and potentially reshape the country's energy sector. For better or for worse, Canada is going to be more green. Not sure how I feel about this, especially as Carney has struggled in this domain before, the whole carbon credits thing, so not expecting much here. And finally, national unity. Carney's strong defense of Canadian sovereignty with his rhetoric against U.S. annexation threats have the potential to foster a sense of national pride and unity. Again, the rally around the flag effect is going strong here. We're probably in a honeymoon period at the moment, but things do look pretty good for him. And so given the potential for significant change across multiple domains, but considering the challenges and uncertainties he faces, I would rate Carney's potential impact as a 6.5 out of 10. His actions in the coming months will be crucial for really seeing what he's like as a politician and a leader, although his track record as a proactive leader in getting things done isn't really super solid. What he does bring is confidence and stability, which could be what Canadians need in their current situation. However, I have my doubts about a rapidly resurgent Canadian economy anytime soon. And so overall, Mr. Carney gets a 7 out of 10 score when averaging out across the three categories, and my intuition provides me with about the same level of confidence. He's definitely the type of leader that Canada needs right now, someone who can remain calm in a crisis, although I don't see him as the long-term leader of change that will really adjust Canada's position in the global pecking order. And so therefore, I see him being more so middle of the road. A great technocrat, a solid leader, a so-so politician. And with that, I'd like to thank you for watching this week's Modern Problems YouTube channel video. What do you think about Mr. Carney, and how do you see the Great Orange Man reacting to his new neighbor? Let me know in the comments below. And if there's any other leaders or topics you'd like me to talk about, please leave a suggestion. Thank you, and enjoy the rest of your day.